Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, thank you very much for joining us here in the studios.
Well, thank you, Paul. Good to be with you.
Let's talk about the news that's been out there for about a week now with Donald Trump, your rival, your main rival for the Republican nomination. He's saying, quote, it's not a settled matter. He's talking about your berth in Canada. He says you can't have a nominee who's going to be subject to being thrown out as a nominee. And then he said he's got to go and got to fix it. What do you say to Donald Trump?
Well, listen, as a legal matter, the question is quite straightforward, which is it has been clear under the Constitution and federal law from the very first days of this nation that the child of a U.S. citizen born abroad is a natural-born citizen. If you travel abroad and you have a child abroad, your child is a natural-born citizen. Our soldiers, when they travel abroad, their children are natural-born citizens. That's why John McCain was a natural-born citizen, even though he was born in Panama. American missionaries, when they travel abroad, their children are natural-born citizens. That's why George Romney, Mitt's dad, who was born in Mexico to Mormon missionaries, was a natural-born citizen, was able to run for president in 1968. And actually, a third example is Barry Goldwater.
Arizona wasn't a state at those days.
Right, Arizona was a territory.
But this is more than a legal matter now. I mean, Donald Trump raises this every day for a week. This is a political story as well. Why is he doing this? What do you say?
Well, look, it starts to suggest maybe he's feeling a little rattled. You know, 4 weeks ago, just about every Republican candidate in the race was attacking Donald Trump. Today, just about every Republican candidate in the race is attacking me. And that starts to suggest maybe something has changed in the race. And
those polls in Iowa, maybe?
Well, you look at the polls in Iowa, the polls in New Hampshire, the polls nationally. What we're seeing is conservatives are uniting behind our campaign. We're seeing conservatives and libertarians and evangelicals. We're seeing the old Reagan coalition coming back together. And I understand that is making other candidates very nervous. More and more, this race is becoming a two-man race between me and Donald Trump.
Is he a true conservative? In your mind, is Donald Trump the true conservative in this race?
Well, you know, that's going to be a question that the voters are going to have to answer. But I think the reason why conservatives are uniting behind my campaign is they're not interested in campaign rhetoric. They're not interested in someone who today says he opposes Obamacare. They're interested in, when have you stood up and fought to stop Obamacare? In 2013, I stood with millions of Americans to lead the fight against Obamacare. They're not interested in someone who today says they oppose illegal immigration. But yet, when Barack Obama and establishment Republicans were pushing a massive amnesty plan, I was proud to stand with millions of Americans fighting amnesty, fighting to secure the border, fighting to keep this country safe, and we defeated amnesty. I was standing shoulder to shoulder with Jeff Sessions and Steve King, and I would note all of the Republican candidates running, including Donald Trump, they were nowhere to be found in that fight. They weren't there. Obama was on the verge of passing amnesty. And where were they? If this is an issue they care about, where were they in that fight?
So you're saying Donald Trump doesn't have the true conservative credentials that you have and you've shown over the years?
The difference we have in this race, it's a difference between campaign conservatives who, when they launch a presidential campaign, every one of them says they're a conservative. That's what you do in a Republican primary. Right. People are fed up. They're fed up with Washington, and they're fed up with politicians who say one thing and do another. They're looking for a consistent conservative who has the record of fighting for freedom, of fighting for the Constitution, of standing with the working men and women of this country, the blue-collar workers who have gotten hammered under the Obama economy. And that's what I've done every day. It's why conservatives are coming behind our campaign. And I'll tell you, the attacks are only going to get worse. You know, there's an old saying, if you're not taking flack, you're not over the target. As long as conservatives keep uniting behind our campaign, the attacks are going to get worse. And it's why you see Hillary Clinton's biggest supporters echoing Donald Trump's attack on me. You know, we've seen in the past where Democrats try to game the system and pick the nominee they want to run against. The Hillary Clinton campaign wants to run against Donald Trump.
They don't want to run against you, you're saying?
They don't. And look, national polling shows that I beat Hillary Clinton, and Donald doesn't. Donald loses to Hillary.
Let me ask you one more question about Donald. This is your first trip here. We're glad you're here, but it's your first trip in 2 months. I had a chance last week to speak one-on-one with Donald Trump. Take a listen. Ted Cruz is shortchanging New Hampshire.
Well, perhaps so. I know I think he's got all his onions in the old basket of Iowa, and you know, that's fine, but he hasn't been here very much. I don't think he intends to be here very much. I'm here all the time.
I want to give you the chance to respond to Donald Trump on a little geography here.
Well, look, as you know, that's not right. I have been in New Hampshire a great deal of time. Last week in this chair, my wife Heidi was sitting here with you. We've got 10 paid staff members across the state. We've got county chairs in all 10 counties in New Hampshire. We've got an army of volunteers. And I'll tell you, this Sunday, we're starting a bus tour 4-day bus tour. We're going to go to every county in New Hampshire, have multiple stops all over the state. You know, a couple of months ago, the 603 Alliance was an alliance of all the conservative groups, the libertarian groups, the Tea Party groups,
right,
all across the state. They held a caucus on who conservatives should back in New Hampshire. I attended the caucus. I'll note other candidates didn't show up. Mr. Trump didn't even bother to show up.
And you, of course.
And we won the endorsement of conservatives in this state by an overwhelming margin. We're running a grassroots campaign. And the great thing about New Hampshire, the first in the nation state, is the men and women here take very seriously their responsibility not to listen to the slick Hollywood TV ads, not to listen to the bluster and the rhetoric, but to look candidates in the eyes, to ask them the hard questions to determine who's telling the truth and who's blowing smoke, who's actually walked the walk. And the reason why we're seeing conservatives in New Hampshire unite behind us is because I have been in a great many VFW halls and living rooms and Dunkin' Donuts. And from now until Election Day, we're going to continue to be here and work hard every day to earn the support of courageous conservatives. And by the way, Reagan Democrats. You know, every stop we do, we see people who come up and say, I'm a Democrat, but I'm backing you. We're seeing that in New Hampshire powerfully. We're seeing libertarians come together. That's what it takes to win, the old Reagan coalition coming together.
Taxes are a very big, important issue here, especially among Republicans in the state, but among all New Hampshire citizens. All right, let's talk about your tax plan, because some of your rivals have been pointing out lately, you've been talking about getting rid of the, trashing both the payroll tax and the corporate tax and replacing them with a tax on all business revenues minus capital investments at 16%. Some of your rivals are saying this sounds like a value-added tax, the dreaded VAT. What do you say to them?
Oh, listen, it's not surprising that other candidates are attacking. They're attacking because they're scared. My tax plan, let me encourage everyone watching this show, go to our website, tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. You can read the detailed white paper on our tax plan. Let me explain it to you. It's a simple, flat tax. For a typical family of four, first $36,000 you earn, you pay nothing. No income tax, no payroll tax, nothing. Above $36,000 on each additional dollar, everyone pays the same simple flat tax of 10%. No longer do you have hedge fund billionaires paying a lower effective tax rate than their secretaries. Everyone pays the same across the board. On the business side, we abolish the corporate income tax. We abolish the death tax, one of the cruelest taxes to farmers and ranchers and small business owners. We abolish the payroll tax, which is the single biggest tax that most working men and women pay. We abolish the Obamacare taxes, and we replace them all with a 16% business flat tax applies across the board. No longer do you have giant corporations paying a lower effective tax rate than small businesses. It's flat and it's fair. And there are two things that are really important for New Hampshire small businesses to know about the business flat tax. One, all capital expenses are immediately expensed. So if you buy new plant, new equipment, you don't have any long depreciation tables. You don't have to extend it over years. You immediately extend it, which is an incredible catalyst to job creation and economic growth. But two, the business flat tax is border adjustable. What that means is if you're producing exports, they're tax-free. You don't pay the business flat tax on those exports. That's an enormous advantage for American businesses. But secondly, imports that are coming to this country, they all pay the 16% business flat tax. What that lets happen is American companies compete on a level playing field. That is going to bring millions of high-paying jobs to America. 5 million jobs, increasing the after-tax income of every American in every income band by double digits. This is a plan for robust economic growth, and I get that people that want big government, they don't like abolishing the corporate income tax and the payroll tax and the death tax. They certainly don't like filling out your taxes on a postcard, and they're terrified by my proposal to abolish the IRS. But we're going to do that, and it's going to unleash unbelievable economic growth.
Before we end this, let me ask you about your faith, which is a big part of your campaign for president. You say you hear from the Lord directly every day as you read the scriptures.
Sure.
Did you hear a message from the Lord, or when you decided to run for the presidency, how much of the Lord and your faith was a part of that factor?
Listen, my prayer life is between me and God, and between me and my family and God. You know, I've never liked politicians who stand up and say, God told me to run for office. You know, my view as a believer is great. When God tells me to vote for you, we'll be on the same page. So that is not how I'm running or what I'm running. Now, that being said, I don't apologize for my faith. I am a Christian. It's an integral part of who I am. Those values are values I'm fighting for. And what I will encourage is believers, whether they are evangelical Christians, whether they are Catholics, whether they are Jews, whether they are Mormons, whether people across this country who take their faith seriously. I would encourage believers in this country simply to stand up and vote our values, that
Right.
this federal government has been waging a war on religious liberty, has been targeting believers, making it harder. You know, we were formed by people fleeing religious oppression and coming to a land. New England was founded by pilgrims fleeing religious oppression, so that every one of us has a right protected in the first part of the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights to seek out and worship God, to live according to our faith and conscience. And that is a right for all of us. I've spent my whole life fighting to defend the Bill of Rights and Constitution, and that's what I'm going to do as president.
Senator, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Paul.